Good morning, everyone. So, if you're anything like me, you're sitting here this morning in your PJs and you're thinking to yourself, man, life is very different right now. Normally, on a day like today, I'd be on my way to Roanoke, I'd be working my job, and I'm still very thankful that I am working from home right now, but it's very different. Maybe you have lost your job. Maybe your finances are very uncertain right now. Maybe you were a senior in high school who was super excited about prom. Maybe you were a senior in college who was super excited about getting that degree, walking across the stage, celebrating all the hard work that you have done over the past several years. And it seems like even some of the best laid plans have come crumbling down around us in an instant. And especially with everything going on with this virus, it just seems like everything has changed. Everything is topsy-turvy. And honestly, when we go through seasons like that, it's very easy to feel discouragement. And that's what I wanted to talk with you all about this morning. I wanted to share with you all a story from the Bible about this girl named Hagar. It's in the book of Genesis. It's very early on in the Bible. But it starts with Abraham. Abraham is this guy who God has promised to bless by giving him all of the offspring that he could ever imagine. The Bible says it would give him as much offspring as there are stars in the sky. And at that time, that was a big deal. Like, you wanted to have as many kids as possible. That was how it was shown that God had blessed you. And so God had made this promise to Abraham, but he was having to wait on it. And that's when some issues come up. And in chapter 16, the waiting for him and his wife Sarah had reached a breaking point. They had become so tired of waiting on God so that they decided to take matters into their own hands. They were going to do something about it. And man, aren't we the same way? When some of the things that we've planned for don't seem to be coming to fruition, it is so easy to try to continue striving to make what we want to happen. Maybe God has promised you something very specifically, like he did to Abraham, and it just hasn't happened yet. It is so easy, so tempting to try to take things into our own hands. But as we'll see here with Abraham and Sarah and Hagar, anytime we do that, it causes some major issues. So Abraham and Sarah in chapter 16, they decide to try to have a kid through Hagar, who is Abraham's slave. And lo and behold, Hagar becomes pregnant. And that's immediately when the problems begin to arise. Just want to start reading in verse 5. It says, then Sarai said to Abram, you are responsible for my suffering. It was her idea, and then it's turned around 180 real quick. You are responsible for my suffering. I put my slave in your arms, and when she saw that she was pregnant, I became contemptible to her. May the Lord judge between me and you. Abram replied to Sarai, here your slave is in your hands. Do whatever you want with her. Then Sarai mistreated her so much that she ran away from her. So Abraham and Sarah's decision has basically ruined Hagar's life. And, whether we like to admit it or not, sometimes our actions have very little repercussions for us directly, but they really impact the people around us, have such great impact. But then some time passes for Abraham and Sarah, and finally they have a child of their own in chapter 21. And that causes even more issues for Hagar, another blow to her life, again, outside of her control. Sarah immediately is over having her and her son Ishmael there. And so she commands Abraham to send them away into the dry and barren wilderness. I'm going to start reading in 21 verse 14. It says, she left and wandered, Hagar, in the wilderness of Beersheba. When the water and the skin was gone, she left the boy under one of the bushes and went and sat at a distance about a bow shot away. For she said, I can't bear to watch the boy die. While she sat at a distance, she wept loudly. And, that's exactly where Hagar finds herself in this season of wilderness, where it seems all of her best laid plans, she had everything going for her. Abraham was providing. Yeah, it necessarily wasn't the greatest situation, but at least all of her needs were taken care of. Her and her son were safe. But now she's in this wilderness through no fault of her own, all of this season of questioning and doubting, where the future seems very uncertain. Sound familiar? It seems a lot like what we're going through right now. And as her son is about to perish from thirst, she's at her wit's end. She's emotional. She cries out, and Ishmael does too. God, I can imagine her saying, she would be like, God, this isn't right. This isn't how things were supposed to happen. Abraham was supposed to take care of me. He was supposed to provide for me. Abraham was supposed to be sufficient. How often are we asking questions like that right now? God, my job was supposed to be sufficient. It was supposed to take care of me and my family. God, I was supposed to be somewhere completely different right now. But right now I'm in this wilderness, this season of questions, doubts, and fears, anxiety. Why, God? That might be some of the questions that are going through your head today. And while it may seem unchristian, these are perfectly normal reactions to have when things aren't going the way that we had planned. But when life gives us an unfavorable hand, and it certainly will, as I'm sure a lot of you all have noticed already, we can choose what we do with it. We can choose how we respond. Jesus tells us in Matthew 11:28 to come to him when we are wearied, when we are burdened, and he will give us rest. He will be with us. When we don't understand the situation around us, he will be our peace. He will be our rest. But that comes only when we choose to come to Jesus, when we choose to cry out to him. We can look to the world for answers, or we can look to the one who made the world. In verse 17, God heard the boy crying, and the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, "What's wrong, Hagar? Don't be afraid, for God has heard the boy crying from the place where he is. Get up, help the boy up, and grasp his hand, for I will make him a great nation." Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well. So she went and filled the water skin and gave the boy a drink. God was with the boy, and he grew. He settled in the wilderness and became an archer. So this tells us that Hagar found that even in the midst of discouragement, a season of questions and doubt, God still provided. He was with Ishmael, and as Deuteronomy 31:6 tells us, God will never leave us either. It is so easy right now, I know, to become fixated on what's wrong, what's not right in the world. And honestly, there are a lot of things, but we can't get bogged down by that. It's so easy to become discouraged, but we can take heart knowing that God is on our side. And Matthew 6:33 tells us that when we seek God and his kingdom, everything else, every other detail, our needs, our job, our family, our finances, our safety, our protection, our provision, where our next meal is coming from, all of that will fall into its proper place. We just have to turn to God. So I hope that encourages you this morning. Be strong in the Lord. I know it's difficult right now, but you can just remember that God is for us. He will never leave us nor forsake us. Just remember that promise as you go through today, through the rest of this week. I hope you're doing well, staying safe. I love you so much. Thanks for tuning in as always. God bless.